suck the marrow out of life. Give it your best shot. Even if you shoot for the moon, you're still going to land among the stars. And if you look at any situation as I cannot fail at this because I'm either going to win or I'm going to learn, to quote Nelson Mandela, which I quoted in my last podcast. I've got to stop doing that. But I truly live by that. If I look at every situation that happens to me as either a lesson that I've learned or a win, you can't lose. So just do it. Do that thing that's been scaring you. Dive in.
Welcome to Beyond the Downloads. I'm Jen, your podcast bestie, here to tell you there's so much more about podcasting than just those numbers. So before you throw in the towel, you better listen up. We're diving deep into the heart of what makes podcasting truly special, from storytelling to connection, and yes, even healing. Think of me as your podcast life raft, ready to help you navigate those choppy waters of this podcasting world and the podcast overwhelm. From understanding the therapeutic power of sharing your voice to the practical tips to grow your show without losing your ever-loving mind. If you're ready to ditch the hustle and create content that leaves a legacy, a tsunami impact, no more ripples. Whether you're launching your first show or looking to take your podcast to the next level, I'm here to help you grow, launch, and yes, make some money from your passion. Let's make your podcasting dreams your reality. It's time to go beyond the downloads, where your story becomes a legacy. I am so excited to do another Your Podcast is Someone's Life Raft interview, because this is what Beyond the Downloads is all about. We're talking about the stories of how we got here, because that's the truth of what podcasting is truly about. Yes, we want to make money. We want to do all the things, but sharing our story is what's going to keep you motivated. So welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here, Jen.
So we got to meet in person, which is my new favorite thing. I thought I hated meeting people in person, but I actually love it. So new Jen, hello. Hi. But we were doing a little micro interview at a beach house in Manhattan Beach. And you were telling me about your story of how you got here. And I think that why this is important and why I want to share this with you audience is that sometimes we have to take that leap, whether it's our podcast, our business. But I want you to tell me a little bit about that juicy story, because my jaw hit the floor and I'm like, no way. That was such a brave move. I want to, from the beginning of where you started, share a little bit about that.
That's so sweet of you to say. And I distinctly remember you making me cry with that one question out of the blue. One minute I'm in a great mood. The next minute I'm like, but that makes you such a good interviewer. But so it was an impulsive decision for me to come to America. I was in Cape Town. I'm originally from South Africa. So I was in Cape Town on a holiday, and I met these people at a barbecue, and they oh, you're great. I was just playing with the baby, oh, you're so great with the kids. Do you want to come to America? We need a nanny for 3 months. And I was like, sure, I'm not doing anything the next 3 months. I just got on my degree in communication of all things with the minor in industrial psychology. So nothing to do with kids, because I'm now 5 generations deep teachers. I'm a 5th generation teacher in education. So both my parents were teachers as well. So I was trying to be the businesswoman other way. And then this just kind of happened, and then they landed up paying for my ticket to come to America. I loaned $250 from my mom. I'd only met these people one time at a barbecue, and I remember landing in the Jacksonville airport, which I now know was the completely wrong airport to book my flight into, because they were in Savannah. But I remember not even knowing how to use a payphone. I didn't know I had to dial the 1 before, and so lots of things had to fall in place. And you say that I'm brave, and I appreciate the compliment, but I don't know if I had known that I was coming here permanently, if I'd had the guts to do it. I think it was because I just took this impulsive leap to do it. But in that, it was really hard, right? So there were lots of times where I got so homesick. I remember just calling my mom and just bawling my eyes out, I'm so homesick. I just want to be home. And she's like, you got this. You'll be okay. You have a good cry and then you carry on. But I think had I not taken that leap and had it not paid off for me the way it did, I think it gave me more of the guts to pursue my own business when I had the opportunity to do that. And I was the single mom and had this brand new little baby. And I was working retail for a horrible boss at the time. I mean, I would just like get the pit in my stomach. Like I've had horrible bosses, right? And I think you can only appreciate a good boss once you've had a bad one. But I remember having to drop my daughter off. And at that time in our area, there was literally only 2 daycares, right? And this place has since closed down, but my daughter never took a pacifier. The first day I came to pick her up, she had a pacifier in her mouth. I just didn't believe in that. For many reasons, it's not good for your children to have pacifiers. But then there were like cockroaches running around and I was like, oh my gosh. So I called my mom and she's like, so she loaned me the money to start the daycare. And then the recession hit 3 months after. So I quit my job. And I was and they were like, oh, it's going to be a turnkey business. Don't worry about it. It's already been a daycare. It was a 9,000 square foot building, was the only building that I could find to lease, right? And 9,000 square feet. I'm thinking, I don't even have one child enrolled yet. So it was one of those like build it and they will come situations, you know? And again, it was this huge leap. And at that point I had gotten married and my husband was like, okay, I'll support you. Go ahead and do this, you know? And so, and then as fate would have it, it wasn't just a turnkey easy thing. It took 9 months to get through the red tape, right? Because all these things popped up, especially with daycares. There's so many more laws and rules and regulations, and the 2 agencies don't always agree. So when DHEC comes, you fix this quickly. And when DSS is there, you change it back to this. So that, you know, so you've got to sort of keep all of them, but I didn't know what I didn't know back then. And anyway, so I'm rambling on, but yeah, so it was just really, and I took all these chances on a whim and they've paid off. There's been some chances I've taken that haven't paid off all that great, but so far I've been very, very lucky and very, very blessed. But I don't think we can ever achieve great things in our lives if we're not willing to take the great risks, right? So going out to the mastermind was a huge risk for me. I stepped out of my comfort zone so much. And I was literally praying about it. I was like, I don't know if I have the finances right now. Well, God just deposited the money into my bank account the next morning. And then she was like, well, you know, she said things on the podcast and I was like, oh my gosh, everything's pointing me there. And then I was like, oh, great. I met people like you. I met so many other wonderful business owners there. I got to go on my first podcast just by people being amazing. And then you are now getting me so excited about the podcast industry and hearing what you've had to say. And so I think, yeah, you've made me really excited about podcasting. So I appreciate that. As I call it podcasting, but nobody understands what I'm saying when I say that. So podcast.
But I love that there's so many little pieces to pick out. But podcasters, as you're listening to this, I want you to hear that you said because of the podcast, it made you feel the confidence to do that. I don't want to focus on that, but as a show for podcasters, I want you to know why I'm sharing these stories. It's because of little nuggets like that. So you took this giant leap. You moved to another country, then you're like, I'm going to have this 9,000 square foot space. Like, I'm looking around my house and I'm like, okay, my house is tiny. Like, this would be like 9 of my houses. This house is a lot of children. So you weren't starting like your normal home, like, I'm going to put 5 kids in my living room. Like, this was like a center, correct?
Yes. A commercial center, and we were licensed for 212 students. Now, I never like reached the full capacity because that's just like jamming them in there. But yeah, like I started with 0 kids when I first opened up, I had no kids, and then I enrolled 7. So I opened up the school with 7 children. I was doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, looking after the kids. Like I would be on the phone doing new enrollments and I'm busy cooking and like, yeah, we're great. Our teachers are awesome. And like, meanwhile it's me and one other person. Like I really just faked it till I made it. You know what I mean? And slowly but surely, like the life I have now is so, so different to how it was those first couple of years because they were really hard. Like entrepreneurship pushes you into, again, it was a huge confidence leap, but again, not confidence leap, it was a huge trust leap, right? Or huge trust fall, as Pink says, trust fall. But both of them came with a lot of like pain and like tears and stuff at the same time too, you know? So it's like, I was talking to somebody about what makes you different is like the grit that you have when hard things happen. So, but yeah, I didn't just go small. Like I didn't just start like normal people would with a home daycare and then build that into something bigger. No, I was like, just build it and they will come. And they did, slowly but surely. So.
And I think that's a lesson that so many of us need to learn is like, we see so much instant gratification. Like if we looked at you now, like I think this is why we need to have these conversations is if we look at somebody right now, it looks like, oh, she built this. She was able to have the 9,000 square feet, blah, blah. But it's like, no, you said it was 9 months of red tape. Well, podcaster, when you're thinking about this, like, yeah, your podcast is going to take the same amount of time. Anything you truly want, you have to take that leap of faith and you have to give it time. Because if in 1 month you didn't jump through all those hoops, like, you wouldn't have been able to get to where you are now.
That's so true. And I think you and I were talking about this before the podcast, was that it is something that you can't expect to see very quick results with. Like it's the same thing. Like anything worthwhile in this life takes a little bit of sacrifice, takes a whole chunk of commitment, anything worthwhile in this life, you know? So I think, but podcasting is a great way, especially for people, I feel like I am still getting used to being visible. Like I said, I just did my first podcast and I'm very grateful to Barbara for allowing me to be on her awesome podcast. But they put the video camera on me and I was like, oh, I look terrible. Please turn it off. I can't concentrate, you know? And so I think the podcasting is a great way for people to be able to talk without that additional pressure, you know? And, especially when they're authentic like you are. I don't think I would enjoy podcasts that are more out for, that's just me personally, but you're very real and you're very authentic. And I think podcasting is very underrated. And I think what you're doing is great because I didn't know the value of podcasting until you told me that and how many, you know, podcasts fail and all of this. And so it really is important to get somebody like you who knows what they're doing, you know.
But you mentioned grit, you know, and I think that's something that as a podcaster, as a business owner, as anybody who wants to do something that's outside of the, you know, what society tells us to do, that's like what we need. So I want to know like when you open this daycare center and now that you're going to be helping others like with early childhood development and all these things. Yes, I just called it all out for you. But like there's moments that we're on the floor and those moments when we're those tear moments, there's so many people that throw it away at that point. Like what was that grit that helped you kept pushing forward?
It's a combination of two things. One, my faith, because I don't know people who don't have something to believe in that's bigger than them. I don't know what they do in those moments, right? But let's take that away because I do stand on my faith. And as a Christian, I do believe that God's got a purpose for absolutely everything that's happening in my life. But whatever your higher power, whatever it is, everybody believes in something greater than themselves or should if they don't. But so that was the one thing. But the other thing too was, you know, my mom was a single mom and she's a phenomenally dynamic woman and she made other people a lot of money in her life. But she would have been, if she ever had the opportunities that she gave me, there's no telling where she would be in this world because she taught me the importance of, you know, having a good cry, then putting on your big girl pants and we dust ourselves off and we get back up and we put a smile on our face and we push our shoulders back and we smile through it. And before you know it, you're going to be feeling better. So it's just about getting back up. And I think that's a general theme that most entrepreneurs, it sounds like a bit of a cliche, like when you get pushed down, you just got to get back up. But there's so many entrepreneurs that fail. It's just that we're persistent in continuing to do what we do. But I also talking about the early childhood, one thing that I'm trying to work on is or one area that I'm researching right now, and I'll probably publish a book in it. But it was about how do we teach our children grit? Because if you talk to any entrepreneur, it comes down to the grit. Do you have the grit? Are you willing to make the sacrifices, to keep your eye on the prize, to push through the difficult times, to deal with the knocks to your ego? Like there's a lot of ego deaths that happen too. And you lose a lot of friends in the process. You learn that your employees will turn on you in a heartbeat, or people there's not one entrepreneur that will tell you, I've had a great experience and nobody's hurt me in business. That if they do, they're lying to you. Because you will cry, but you've got, I think also the other thing, Jane, is the purpose. God knew to set things up the way he did, because I knew that it was those kids that needed me. It was the parents and the grandparents that were raising their babies. And I was serving a purpose that was bigger than just me. And I think that's what made me get up. And then also in the midst of all of this, I was questioning whether or not I should be doing all of this, because I was like, oh yeah, great. I can just lay back. My husband's got me until I get this off the ground. Well, he lost his job 2 months in. So we were both without a job. And at one point we were on food stamps till I got the school up and going, It was hard at one point. I was paying my staff before I was paying myself. I've been poor, get your kids piggy bank to eat poor. But you have to go through that. And for me now, to go grocery shopping and not have to use the calculator, that to me is huge. We were just talking about that too. I don't need to be uber wealthy. I find so much joy in the little. It would be nice to be uber wealthy, but I think it's really important that you find your joy in the little things in life too. Otherwise, all the money in the world's not going to make a difference, right? So I completely veered off the topic. But
oh no, I love this conversation.
Podcast,
And I love this conversation because I think there was one thing that you said early on is that you cry and then dust yourself off. And I think so many of us choose to, one, sit in the cry, or two, ignore the cry and just let's power through until your body's like, this can't happen anymore. So I think that that's a really valuable lesson that you were taught, is that sometimes you have to go through that ego death. You have to go through that cry, and it's okay. It's okay to be not okay. And I think that as entrepreneurs and what we see online and what we hear is we've all heard it. It's the Instagram. It's the highlight reel of people's lives. Let's normalize the fact that it sucks sometimes.
It does. Yeah. And I think it's also, Jen, it's so important to have at least one or two people in your corner that you can trust. And especially my best friend, Faye, she's a phenomenally successful businesswoman. And she, there were many days where she had to walk me off of the edge, where I was I've had it. I'm closing it down. I don't care. And she's just breathe. Don't make any decisions in a state of emotional duress, and I'm glad I didn't give up. But, and it's also this is something that I was called to do. I never went out looking for it, and I think I forgot to tell you that story in the middle of this opening up to me coming to America. Was I had just finished studying in South Africa. I had 2 job offers, or I could continue my studies and get my master's. And I was literally at a point where I was God, I need your direction in my life. Whatever you want to do with my life, go ahead, take it. I just need to know what I'm doing. Show me where to go. And literally a barbecue turned into, this whole other life in America that I never even considered would be a possibility for me, and everything that fell into place. Same thing with going to the mastermind, same thing with my school. Show me, and the universe will show you, And also, I'm a huge believer in manifestation and putting what you want up on somewhere visually and making yourself remember why you're doing what you're doing, because you're not strong enough in your own strength.
But we all think we are.
Yeah, but all of us reach burnout though. We keep going, and we don't take the time to take care of ourselves. And that's only something that I learned after I had a nervous breakdown. You know what I mean? You only learn that after you haven't taken care of yourself and your health starts taking a dive, then you're like, oh, I should have been taking care of myself. And then it's too late, you know?
Yeah. And it's hard. Like you said, you opened your school with 7 people. Like like if we relate that to podcasting, it's like, okay, maybe you only have 7 listeners and you're pouring your heart and soul into something. It's like, it's hard. Like whether we're talking about podcasting or opening up a daycare center that's 9,000 square feet. Oh my God. I'm like, that's such a big set with 200 plus kids. I'm like, holy crap. Like my brain is still trying to compute that. But it's like,
and sometimes I walk around and I'm like, I can't believe that this is there, but it's so important, especially the podcasters, I think, you know, might get a little bit discouraged. You were saying there's so many that just give up, but I think, like, if I'm not wrong, that's what you were saying, is like, keep at it with the podcasting, because people are going to want to hear what you have to say, and it will gain traction eventually, you know.
Mm-hmm. Just like your school did. And that's why this podcast is called Beyond the Downloads, because we get so blindsided and like blinders on, like focus. We're doing this and it can't relate to anything else, but it really can. Like I relate your 7 kids to 7 downloads, like totally different, because you have like a huge monetary investment, where podcasting is not. It's a big investment if you're going to do it, but it's not the same. It's the same, but different. Right. And I think that the main thing here is like to be able to have the meltdowns, pick yourself up, move forward, and let things blossom. Because before we started this interview, we were like, well, what are we doing now? Like, you know, I want to know, like, what's next? You know, like we had this big school, like what's next? What do you want to do? And I think that that's the beautiful thing about podcasting and sharing your story, is that as you share, look at all the things that came out. So during our conversation, like you started talking about a current thing that's going on. Whether you want to share that or not, I'll let you share that. But it's something that needs to be spoken about. So how do we share those stories? Like, how do we have the faith that as we have the 7 kids in our school, that more are going to come?
You know, and I think one of the things is, I want to say believing in yourself, but there have been so many times where I haven't believed in myself, you know? And so I think there's a lot to be said for just, I mean, there have been times in my life where it's just been coming at me from all directions, where I literally woke up and cried for the first hour and before I went to work. And at that point in time, I didn't have support staff. So I was working from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., just exhausted by the time I got home. My quality of life was absolutely nothing. And so when anybody gives me a hard time now about working as much as I feel like, or showing up at the school whenever I feel like, I'm like, hey, don't forget, I've paid my dues. I've put in the work, and now I get to reap the benefits, which is great 18 years later, but it's 18 years later, you know? And I was just blessed that my business was able to survive. But I think it's a lot of times you got to look at just, don't focus on the big picture when you get overwhelmed. And I think you and I were talking about that. I'm at one of those places in my life again where I'm like, show me where to go next, because I'm going in all these different directions and I'm really struggling with getting the clarity on that. So I know that I want to be able to help other daycare centers or people that are thinking about opening up a daycare. I'd love to consult with them one-on-one to be able to help them through the entire process. I'm talking, you know, because I didn't have anybody that was like, this is who you call for that. This is who you call for that. Here's where you start. These are the things you need to look at. I didn't have any of that. And most of the states have technical assistants, but they would only specialize in what their department does. Nobody brings it all together for you as a brand new daycare owner, unless you're willing to pay twice as much for, you know, the, what do you call it when they have, what do you call it?
Like a franchise type
Yeah,
thing?
for the franchises. But you don't need to pay all that franchise money. You just need to hire a good consultant. But I didn't have the money back then, and there were mistakes that I made in the early stages of my business, which also relates to podcasting, because, and that's what we were talking about ahead of time, was like, I need to look at what you're investing in the podcasting. You need to look at that as your initial investment. So if your podcasting consultant is costing you $700 a month. That is just part of your overhead on building your brand or building your, and I think also what's great with the podcasting is you can literally take one episode, and like you had mentioned earlier, there's so many things that you can pull out from it and create more podcasts and go in all these different directions. I think it's very valuable to have somebody like you that helps people navigate this whole, because it's a very, somebody said to me the other day, what is a podcast? Like, there's so many people that still, and they're like our age. And I was like, what? Like, how are there people that don't know what podcasting is? You know, like, so it's valuable to start the conversations.
And that's it right there. It's the conversations, which is why like I'm so excited about like you wanting to shift the conversation. You're like, I built the school. It's running. It's done. It's like I can show up but where can I, and for when we had the conversation, it's not like, where can I build this so that I can make all this money, so I can have all the flashy things and like, do all the things, which let me tell you, some of the behind the scenes things, like it's not, don't always believe what you see like online, like don't do it. But I think that that's it. It's the conversations, like having a place where you can have a true conversation. And that's the beauty of podcasting, right? Is it's an intimate conversation because you're with somebody who's going for a walk, washing the dishes, on a way driving. So they're doing these tasks that are kind of putting them in a meditative state. So you can have this ability to make the power and with what you want to help with, because again, I'm not going to share what we were talking about unless you wanted to share, but like, as we were having this conversation, like there's some holes in this gap. And yeah, it started as a daycare. Yeah. But you've found a passion within this. And this is what happens. Like whether you stick with podcasting, you stick with your business, you'll find that passion that'll drive you. So I'm excited.
Again, something bigger than yourself. And then what we had spoken about was the whole pandemic babies and how that's been affecting, I think so many parents are not even aware that their children are a lot more behind than they need to be. I've had to change the way my business runs. And we had mentioned this where, and I don't know how many businesses are still adapting what they need to adapt to accommodate. But for me, being in the early childhood space, I see so many children that are so far behind right now. And this is something that I'm busy researching as to get to the core reasons why these 3 and 4-year-olds are not potty trained, not speaking, pointing and grunting to get things. I have had to adjust my school's enrollment and the way we do things and set up classes differently to accommodate all these kids that are 3 and 4 years old. I'm now having to have a whole classroom just for the therapists because we have so many therapists coming in that we actually have to have a separate room for the therapist to be in and just to help these kids. But that 1 hour a week is not helping. We need the parents to join this, to join this whole the whole effort to get our pandemic babies back where they need to be, because we need to fix this before that they become adults, And so that's something I'm really excited to start working with you on, as to help me to start finalizing, all those discussions and getting in front of the right people and everything like that, because it's just nobody's talking about the pandemic babies right now or the pandemic parents, quite frankly. And then, but it's also not just limited to kids that were born during the pandemic. It's like there's been a shift since then in the way that people are parenting, and what that is attributed to is a whole nother story.
But the main thing is that you kept showing up and you kept leaning in, and you're like, now that I've created space, I see a hole that needs to be and you're figuring out a way to put that in there. And that's what I want people to take away is like, yes, it takes grit, and like what you start with isn't necessarily where you're going to go. There will be pieces that'll branch out that you'll find that unique thing. Like people think it's like, I was like, podcasting is a healing modality. Everyone's like, what? Like, no, it's a business tool. I'm like, no, it's a healing modality. And that's like, as I'm leaning in, I'm leaning more into that, because I truly do believe it's like a healing modality that can build an entire business and an entire life.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have gone to the mastermind. I wouldn't have gone through my whole I've been on this journey of self-discovery and just holding myself to a higher standard, but starting to do the work, which is ridiculous because I'm almost 50 years old. But the work I thought I was doing, and then when I went to the mastermind, I'm like, where did that come from? There's obviously still a whole bunch of work that I need to be doing that I wasn't even aware of. But it's so important to, again, start the conversations, get in the right rooms, surround yourself with the right people. I do think it's very important that we keep things authentic. And I think there's so much fakeness out there and especially there's this cultural thing that people aren't being authentic anymore. And I'm somebody who very few people feel ambivalent towards. Like, you're either going to love me or you're going to hate me. And I'm okay with that either way. And for me to say that has come such a long way, because there was a time where if you just looked at me the wrong way, I would just crumble and cower and they don't like me and they don't love me. And now I think that's one of the great things my business taught me, was also to get that little bit of a thick skin. But, and everybody, and it's not just pertaining to business owners either. The podcasting really can be such a healing modality. And it's almost like, hearing what you need to hear. And it's funny how what you can hear on that podcast that day will spark a thought or will be exactly what you were meditating on the night or praying for or whatever. So, and like you said, Jen, your a podcast that you heard was literally life-changing for you. And this podcast that I heard was life-changing for me. I got to meet you. I got to meet so many other cool people. And it really was as life-changing for me. Had it not been for the podcast, I wouldn't have been here, So I think it's very underrated. And I love that you're making people so much more aware of it,
Yeah. Because so many people listen, and it's like we need to realize how much of an impact that listening is. So if people want to continue the conversation with you, where can we find you? Like, where can people come hang out with you?
Right now I'm on TikTok, Shanel Burger 1. And then on Instagram, it's Shanel VJ2.
And I'll make sure to get those in the show notes so that you can click and go, because we like it easy peasy lemon squeezy around here.
Thank you. And then ChanelVJ2@gmail.com. I also do a little bit of educational, continuing education credits and things like that for the state of South Carolina. So I'm excited for all of that training to be done too. So you just email me at ChanelVJ2@gmail.com.
I love that. So if someone was to walk away with one little nugget, what do you want our final nugget to be that we share?
Ooh, Jen. It's such a cliche to say don't give up. But, Jen, that's a hard one. Suck the marrow out of life. Give it your best shot. Even if you shoot for the moon, you're still going to land among the stars. And if you look at any situation as, I cannot fail at this because I'm either going to win or I'm going to learn, to quote Nelson Mandela, which I quoted in my last podcast. I've got to stop doing that. But I truly live by that. If I look at every situation that happens to me as either a lesson that I've learned or a win, you can't lose. So just do it. Do that thing that's been scaring you. Dive in, make that connection, follow up. If there's a thought in your head, like I've been consistently, reaching out to you and to all the other cool ladies that I met. And usually I would have just let it go. But,